Patch, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So I want to kind of get into the games, but I think the story behind the games is the first thing I want to talk about because it's fascinating. So you've made, what is it now, 4 games?
Six in total.
Sorry, 6 games. My apologies. But by day, you're a teacher, right? And that's how it all began.
It is, exactly. Would you
Tell-
like me to start off from the beginning?
Yeah, please tell me about it. I mean, it's a fascinating story. Tell me how it all came about.
So it all came about this time, well, actually, no, a bit further away, May last year. And Brexit was dominating the news. And I have a kind of mentor group, which is a group of kids who they're not a class, but they're a year group, and they meet before school. And we have 25 minutes to get them ready for the day. And I like doing current affairs with them and getting them updated and in the know on what's going on.
How old are these students?
They are 17, 18.
Okay.
So the next generation who are going to start voting. And some of them were going to be voting in the referendum.
Right.
And I was instantly kind of shocked, appalled, and discouraged by how little and disengaged they were with everything.
So a good representation of the British public then.
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, it's not just them. It was going on in families, homes, offices all over the country. And I wanted to try and get them to become critical thinkers and independent learners. What I was finding is they were just regurgitating the same old kind of echo chamber thinking, which I don't know if that was from the social media they'd been absorbing or just their environment. I think probably a massive combination of all of it. So I created the Brexit card game, printed it out on bits of card and paper, made it with them, and it was a brilliant way to just get them engaged in the topic and to get them thinking critically and independently about certain characters who are kind of making all these key decisions in politics at the time.
Awesome. So you used the game that you created with these students to teach them about the current affairs of the current political climate, to get them engaged in something because it was a fun conversation rather than just, here's this guy, this is what this guy does. I think it's brilliant. But you took it a step further, right? So you then took it into your business class too, yeah?
So then I had the designs, exactly. I had the designs and the game concept. And I'd kind of taken ideas from different games. So the game worked and was quite good. So I took it to my business class and said, right, let's try and turn this into a product. So we looked at the best way to do that. We found ASIN codes, EAN codes. I kind of finished the designs. We then looked at suppliers that we could potentially use. I wanted at the time for it to be English focused, and I wanted them to concentrate on finding an English supplier. And we looked at the advantages and disadvantages of that. Obviously, it's a lot more expensive. But at the time, I just thought that was an important thing for them to kind of understand and get their head around. And then we kind of listed them on Amazon. And I did a few adverts here and there. Some worked, some didn't. And every week, we would kind of quickly follow the story of how the games were selling and what my profit and loss was, etc., etc.
Must have been fascinating for the students to see something that they've been involved in actually being bought and shipped to real human beings who had nothing to do with you or them or the school, and just buying a product that they'd been a part of because they wanted to play your collective game. It must have been an amazing experience for you and them.
I absolutely loved it. And it was one of those things where, I mean, it's difficult to get 15, 16-year-olds, the specific class that I've really got engaged on this topic. And it's quite tricky to get 15, 16-year-olds engaged in anything. But no, there were definitely moments where I was like, okay, no, they're into this. This is good. We're going on a journey. There's a story. That was really satisfying.
Yeah, I bet. I love it. And what did you get any reaction from the parents or other teachers? What was the vibe? Did they think you were crazy, or did they think the idea was amazing?
No, the parents were actually really supportive, and I had a couple of parents actually buying the game, um,
Right.
which was brilliant. And then no, teachers were supportive. No, yeah, it was very kind of well supported, the whole thing.
Wonderful. What about the other students in other classes? They must have been sitting there thinking, "Come on then, teach. Like, what's going on here? We're not going to use the curriculum. Sure, we're just going to make and sell a board game, right? This isn't normal class with you anymore." It must have created a bit of a reputation for you as the fun teacher.
Um, well, yeah, potentially, um, but it was very much. We would do it. We'd follow it for kind of 10, 15 minutes a lesson. And yeah, you're right. It wasn't necessarily on curriculum. Um, However, you've got to get these kids engaged somehow. And if you get
Absolutely.
that 15 minutes and they click, then you will have them absorbing information, listening to you more. Kind of, they're more fully engaged. Um, and I found, I mean, it was a little trick. It definitely works for me.
Definitely. And I mean, everyone's seen it in their own lives or on any rubbish sitcom. There's that moment when the student comes back from school and the parents sit down at a table and they say, "So, son, daughter, what did you learn at school today?" And the kid's like, "Oh, I don't know," because they can't bother talking about it. I bet during this process, they were actively volunteering that information rather than grumpily, monosyllabically answering the question reluctantly because they don't want to talk about it. Because you're providing this fun learning experience that's creating something completely unique to them in their class. Like there won't ever be that class ever again. Whereas the curriculum, it's the same class in the same school in the same year over and over again. Uh, Pretty much. Teachers bring what they can to it, but you're so tied down from my limited understanding of teaching. I'm not a teacher myself, but for someone like you to bring something so fresh and original to the classroom, if my kids went there, I would be absolutely applauding that. So I think it's so good. Like the pressure must be on to be like, what's next? What's the next you're going to bring to the class? But I know you've developed a few other games from that kind of created your own personal buzz. Like you enjoyed the process so much, you then went on and made some more, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I kind of wanted to go down the route of um, getting people more engaged in what's going on in the world, and making and forming their own opinions that isn't stimulated by fear,
Mm.
and just having more information. And I just found when I was doing it with my pupils, the frequency that people are on when you're playing a game is you're fun, it's slightly competitive, but you're definitely more relaxed.
Mm.
And when you talk about quite kind of complex and at the moment incredibly divisive issues, it can be very hard for people to have a serious conversation and a debate where they're being empathetic and listening to someone who may not necessarily have the same opinion as them.
Mm.
But when you have a game and when that kind of frequency is a bit lighter, um, you have these really incredible conversations where you are listening and you are taking on board what someone else is saying. And I just find that whole thing fascinating.
Mm.
I don't know the exact psychology behind it, but I know there's something there, and I just want to explore that avenue, uh,
Mm.
experiment and play around with it where I can,
Mm.
um, and see if there is really something there that is beneficial for people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I applaud you for it. I think it's a wonderful initiative. So the game itself was essentially top trumps with a twist.
Yeah.
You took a core game that everybody's played and probably got a copy of in their household right now, and added some new elements to it. Can you talk to us about those new things you brought to the game?
Yeah, sure. So I added certain kind of political elements to the game to kind of and events. So we had political action cards and political event cards, and the political action cards were things um, like the Russian hacker. And if you got the Russian hacker, you were able to look at someone's card without the other players knowing. So you look at their card and you know what's going on. I also then had different events. So the whole proroguing of Parliament that happened, that hadn't happened for an incredibly long time in politics. And
Mm.
even when the prorogation happened, last year. It was completely unprecedented, and people didn't really know what was going on. So I added a proroguing card and just other elements like that. So proroguing meant you basically got 3 goes in a row, sort of thing.
Right.
Just funny, amusing little things like that.
And teaching people what that word means, right? Because
Exactly.
I mean, there's been so many words we've all learned as a group, like furlough, and like what did that mean a year ago? No one had a clue. It's interesting how these things come into language, and I think what you're doing is you're bringing it to the attention of your students in just such a fun and an engaging way. So after you made the Brexit game, and you had quite a what's the right word? You know, the title of it is obviously quite eye-catching and deliberately shocking.
Yeah.
And the art of it is all the same. I guess you then decided to do something a little bit more relaxed and mainstream appealing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So I've done I wanted to do one on diet and vegans. And my students famously go and have McDonald's after every meal. And if I started talking about how they're going to eat their vegetables, they switch off, don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So I created a very controversial, catchy title saying "Vegans suck." They're instantly hooked.
Yeah.
And then inside the elements of the game, it is very simple, kind of shedding card game. Anyway, inside that is kind of different facts about foods and that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love it. When we first spoke a few weeks back, and I saw that game, I've got to say, like my middle class life, I looked at that title, and even me, I was like, and I try and consider myself to be quite an open-minded guy, and I saw that, I was like, ooh, it raised my eyebrows, and it's just ridiculous how everybody judges a book, and in this case, a card game by its cover. But I just like the fact that you're doing that. You're deliberately trying to shock people with the art and the style and the name, just to get them into this topic and get them talking about it. And after we spoke last time, I then spoke to my kids about that game. They're 7 and 5, and they had no idea what the word vegan was prior to that. Now they've kind of got an idea about it, and I just like that. I like that you're bringing these topics to a more palatable conversation. I think it's really cool, and I like what you're doing. So, and then after that, you've created the international medlars, right?
So then I expanded it slightly after Brexit and just made 32 characters who have been dominating world politics and power circles in the last 5 years, including people like Steve Bannon, who is Donald Trump's right-hand man, and has quite a right-wing news organization called Breitbart. And I just want people to be aware of who these people are.
Yeah.
And then another person called Alexander Nix, who ran the Cambridge Analytica company, which essentially is a company that posted through algorithms news feeds that would get people swung in an election. And they did it in the Trump election, they did it in the Brexit election. And without that company, the world political stage, as we know it, would be an entirely different place. So I was just kind of, getting people familiar with who these characters are and what they've done.
Yeah, I think that's great. And again, you're just bringing quite a highly sensitive, perhaps, or awkward conversation to the table in a really palatable way. I mean, people always say don't talk about politics with your family. With this game, you kind of have to, but it's in such a fun, neutral way. I can't see it being argumentative. It's just fun. What?
And I'm going to add another thing to it. And it is important we have these conversations with our families. If we can't have them with our families, if we have such short tempers with our families about these conversations, how are we ever going to get anywhere? It is super important. And then, as I said, I mean, they're very small, jokey cards, but they will have like silly names. So Alexander Nix is Alex Nix Data, and it's silly things like that get you into it. As you said, in that kind of that fun, amusing way. And I really do believe that is important.
Yeah, agreed. So is there anything you're working on now? Is there a new thing, a new game that you've got your bubbling away in your mind?
I do. How woke are you? Is going to be a question game, and I mean, I'm excited about that one. I've got quite a few more questions to write. I think I've got to come up with roughly about 2,000 questions to make the game work.
Wow.
And at the moment, I'm on 1,400.
Right.
So we're getting there, slowly but surely. But
So
that one I'm excited about.
that's a reference that's gone over my head. You're going to have to help me out.
Okay, so wokeness is all to do with how knowledgeable you are with the um, prejudices and justices that are going on in the world and have gone on.
Okay.
So people who are, and it's one of those words that has been, the meaning of it is kind of being kind of taken somewhere else. And it's now just a kind of an overused word in the news.
Mm-hmm.
And woke can be a way to describe, the woke police, for someone who's potentially very left wing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going at it from an angle where here's some really important content that we should all know. Here are some questions. Here's some content that we all do know, potentially for the wrong reasons. And who knows it best? Whoever does will be the winner of the game.
Okay, that sounds cool. So with the new term about to start, when does your school start? Is it this week or next?
So I am cover teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will probably be going in second or third week of September.
Okay.
When teachers start to get ill, and that will be in about 150 different schools in London, depending on who needs me when.
Wow. Okay, that's crazy. Well, I wish you safe working travels throughout that. In your mind, are you planning on taking some of these games in with you to try and engage with these students and get them to understand these topics? Is this a continual thing for you? Do you now see yourself as the teacher who makes and plays games with his kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Games will be coming in. Games will be left at each school, and that is something I really want to keep on going. And I think, especially with cover teaching, where you do go in as a kind of a teacher that the children don't have that much respect for because they don't know you and you haven't earned their respect. So I think it'll be quite a good tool in the classroom to say, hey, look, I'm not your average cover teacher. Let's have a chat about some important issues. Let's try and get the work done. And hopefully it will mean I don't get totally ignored throughout the day.
Well, I hope it works. And in a funny way, it's kind of like you're acting as a traveling salesman for your own board game company as well, because you get to promote this game to all these different kids a different day of every week. And you sell a couple each day, that will pay for your travel back home that day.
That's true. That is true.
I mean, I just think it's so cool. I've got such a passionate feeling that games should be included more in education. When we spoke last, I was talking about my cousin in Australia who is a teacher who passionately brings games into her classroom every day and has had a terrible reaction from some of the other teachers and some of the parents who just see their kids playing games and instantly think, well, that's just dossing and wasting time. But there's so much core mechanics in games that teach you things like basic maths, strategy, thinking. There's games that are great for science, even if it's just concentration or communication skills or interpersonal skills. But what you've done is you've added a whole extra layer on top of that, where it does a lot of those things, but also politics and social issues and just general awareness of what's going on around you outside of, like you said, the bubble that everyone gets into. And I just think it's brilliant. I would love other teachers to see this and be inspired by what you're doing, and maybe reach out to you and say, hey Patch, can I get a copy of your game, or can you give me advice about how what you did could be incorporated in my school, because my head teacher would hate it and I know it's going to be a nightmare. If that started happening, is that the sort of thing that you want from this? What's sort of the goal for you here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can remember in our last conversation you were saying, Jim, that you were playing a maths game with your son, I think it was.
Yeah.
And after about 3 weeks, he kind of had a complete understanding of what the game was about and all the different elements that the maths was kind of posing towards him.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible how a game can teach you that.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm absolutely on getting games into schools, getting pupils off their phones, getting them it's social skills, it's learning about strategy, learning about maths in a lot of cases, social sciences, the ability to talk to other people, all of those things I think are massively important. And I mean, if any teacher did approach me and say, "Can I get a copy of your game?" Absolutely, send me your address. I'll send one over. That's
Awesome.
what it's about.
So how could people reach out to you? What's the best way for teachers to do that?
Best way to reach out to me is my website or my email, patch@patchgames.co.uk.
Cool. And the website is patchgames.co.uk.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, I'll put a link of that in the description of this video. And I'd encourage anyone who has anything to do with education in any country to reach out. And even if it's just to start a conversation or share things that you've done, I just think it's such a wonderful thing. I've got 2 young kids, 7 and 5, and I would love to think that as they continue the next 10, 15 years of their education, that games form a part of that. Because as we talked about, it brings so much I have seen at home to their learning. And I just think it's awesome that someone like you is willing to break the mold of the very strict curriculum that is given to you. And also for you in your own personal life, have a bit of fun, because I know how teaching is not an easy job. There's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork. And if there can just be like 5-10 minutes of fun for you as well as the kids, then I just think that's a brilliant thing. So good on you, Patch. It's been awesome talking to you. I wish you all the best with what you're doing in school and what you're doing with your games. I encourage people to check it out, and I hope they enjoy what you're doing. Good on you.
Jim, thank you very much for having me, mate.
You're welcome. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, mate. Have a good one.